Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are taking a really fascinating look into the hidden engine of our everyday communication. We're going to explore how our brains actually process language. And honestly, it's not exactly what you might think. We love to imagine that we're crafting every single sentence like a master builder, laying down words one by one. But the reality is way more efficient and, to be honest, a lot more interesting. Think about it for a second. How do we speak so fast without overthinking every single word? We can rattle off these incredibly complex sentences at lightning speed, express deep emotions, debate ideas, all without pausing to conjugate a verb or hunt for the perfect adjective. Well, it turns out our brains are basically using hidden shortcuts to pull off this rapid-fire fluent speech. We really aren't building every sentence from scratch. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the magic of chunks. Next, defining formulaic sequences, followed by the brain's language shortcuts. Then we'll hit the second language struggle, how to unlock speech fluency, and finally, rethinking language learning entirely. Section 1, the magic of chunks. It's kind of crazy how often we use stock phrases in our daily lives without ever analyzing what they literally mean. We just take them completely for granted. Take Rice Krispies. We all know the cereal, right? But did you ever actually pause to think that the name literally translates to crisp rice? Probably not. You internalize that name as one single unit, a pre-built chunk, without breaking it down into two separate words. The exact same thing happens with idioms, like pulling someone's leg. When you hear that, you don't visualize a person physically grabbing a leg and pulling it. You instantly get the concept of teasing. We process the phrase whole. It's incredibly efficient, and it happens entirely under our conscious radar. Section 2, defining formulaic sequence arts. To really ground this everyday phenomenon in the science, we have to look at the foundational work of Dr. Alison Wray. In her research, specifically Formulaic Language in the Lexicon, she explores how a massive proportion of our everyday language is surprisingly predictable. Her work highlights that our communication relies heavily on these prefabricated chunks, completely challenging the old-school idea that we generate every single sentence word by word. So the crucial point is right here in this definition. A formulaic sequence is basically a string of words that is stored and retrieved as a whole unit from your memory exactly when you need it. It is not generated on the fly by grammar rules. You literally just grab the whole phrase out of your mental toolbox and drop it into the conversation. It bypasses the slow, clunky grammatical construction process entirely. It's off-the-shelf, ready-made language. I absolutely love this quote from the linguist Otto Jespersen. He said, "A language would be a difficult thing to handle if its speakers had the burden imposed on them of remembering every little item separately." And that hits the nail on the head. It perfectly illustrates why our brains desperately need these pre-packaged units just to survive daily communication. If we had to build every thought from scratch, from the ground up, every single time, we would literally never get a word out. Which brings us to Section 3, the brain's language shortcuts. And this brilliantly illustrates what is actually happening under the hood. Our brains use a dual processing system for language. On one side, you've got analytic processing. Think of this like building with Legos, starting from scratch, applying grammar rules. It's incredibly flexible and lets us express highly specific, brand new ideas. But man, it is slow and it takes a ton of mental energy. On the flip side, we have holistic processing. This is where we retrieve those pre-built chunks. Sure, it's a bit rigid. You generally don't mess with the internal wording of a chunk, but it is lightning fast and requires practically zero cognitive effort. So why does the brain lean so heavily on these chunks? Well, dealing with complex grammar seriously taxes our working memory. To save precious cognitive effort, our brains employ something called the idiom principle. By relying on chunks, we overcome our short-term memory limits. We bypass that painfully slow grammatical assembly line. And most importantly, it frees up our attention so we can actually focus on the message we're trying to convey, instead of obsessing over how to string the words together. This is the exact mechanism that enables natural speech fluency. Imagine if every time you said hello to a friend, you had to consciously construct the greeting word by word. You'd be totally exhausted. Moving on to Section 4, the second language struggle. Now, if chunks are the ultimate secret to fluency, what happens when we try to learn a brand new language? Why is it so famously difficult to sound natural? Well, take a look at this number, 16%. In a study analyzing Chinese junior high school English textbooks, researchers discovered that formulaic sequences made up only about 16% of the vocabulary lists. That is alarmingly low. especially when you consider that for native speakers, these pre-built chunks make up anywhere from 20 to 60% of their daily spoken and written discourse. The core issue here is a massive misunderstanding of what vocabulary actually is. Traditional language education falsely equates learning vocabulary with just memorizing single, isolated words from a glossary list. But vocabulary is so much more than just single words. If students are only taught individual words and strict grammar rules, they end up sounding robotic, kind of stilted. Why? Because we are forcing them to rely almost entirely on that slow, exhausting analytic processing for every single sentence they try to utter. Section 5, Unlocking Speech Fluency. Now, what's really interesting to see here is how these language chunks actually function in the wild. Butler's 3 metafunctions break down exactly what they do, and it shows us exactly what traditional textbooks are missing. First, there are interpersonal functions. These convey attitudes and manage social acts, things like saying, "Thank you very much," or "I agree with." Then you have textual functions, which manage the flow of information with phrases like, "and so on," or "the thing is that." Finally, ideational functions describe time, place, and things, like saying "in the middle of." These aren't just random filler words. They are the functional glue of natural conversation. They do the heavy lifting in our social interactions. And when learners finally master these sequences, the physical mechanics of their fluency completely shift. They start to automatize their speech. This instantly decreases the cognitive effort required, meaning their brain isn't working overtime just to form a basic thought. It speeds up their overall speech rate and articulation. It extends the mean length of their vocal runs, which basically means they can speak in longer continuous strings without stopping. And thankfully, it drastically reduces those awkward silent pauses while they search their brain for a grammar rule. They stop translating word by word, and they actually start communicating. Let's wrap this up with Section 6, Rethinking Language Learning. All right, so it's time to translate all these dense psycholinguistic insights into an actionable game plan. Step 1. We absolutely must shift the focus away from memorizing single words and start prioritizing these formulaic sequences. Step 2, engage with these chunks through actual discourse practice. We're talking real contextual conversations here, not just filling in blanks on a worksheet. And step 3, review these sequences repeatedly, but in varied contexts. Mastering these chunks through natural dialogue, that is the real key to sounding like a native speaker and communicating effortlessly. Let's move to the expert consensus and see how this builds a completely new paradigm. As researcher Jay Konzett states perfectly, the most important thing for teachers is to shift their and their students' focus away from individual words to formulaic sequences because they improve the fluency and accuracy. This isn't just a minor tweak to a lesson plan, folks. Teaching chunks fundamentally revolutionizes how we acquire a second language. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. As you go about your day-to-day, talking to your friends, your family, or your colleagues, ask yourself, how much of your own daily conversation is truly original, built completely from scratch? And how much of it is just you hitting play on pre-recorded chunks? The answer might really surprise you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep listening closely to those incredible shortcuts happening right inside your own mind.